On Tuesday this week, the United Nation Human Rights Council started the fourth cycle of China review during its 45th session of UPR, Universal Periodic Review. It is a peer review of the human rights records of all 193 UN member states, where states are expected to spell out steps they have taken to implement recommendations posed during their previous reviews, which they committed to follow up on and highlight recent human rights developments in the country. To discuss more on the current fourth cycle of UPR on China, I'm pleased to have Representative Thinlay Chukki from the Tibet Bureau Office joining us from Geneva. Tashtilek and welcome to our program, Tilela. So we discuss about the fourth cycle of UPR, specifically on review on China's rights record. So can you briefly tell us what does UPR mean for Tibet and also for the human rights defenders around the world today?
Right. UPR, of course, Universal Periodic Review, is one of the most important platforms for other member countries to assess, review, and recommend about the human rights situation in their peer group. So this is not unlike others, other mechanisms. This is not something that the UN does. It's more the member states talk about each other's human rights records. And therefore, I think it is a very important platform for Tibet, because you have nearly 160 odd member states who really talk about what are the key human rights issues that they think are important, and also where they seek improvement and development. And therefore, I think for Tibet, it is definitely a very important stage to portray that Tibet remains a very relevant issue in the current international scenario, and a very important stage to sort of highlight the deplorable human rights situation in Tibet. And for human rights defenders, of course, we do not have many cases where individual human rights defenders' names are sort of brought about, but then definitely concerns about the situation of human rights defenders are often discussed. So this platform, unlike any other platform, brings together member states and also an opportunity for the member states to comment, review, and recommend about the human rights situation in their peer group.
Okay. And yesterday, during the China review on its first day at the 45th session of the UPR, there was a record number of 160 member states who spoke on China's human rights record, many in praise of China. And we have also seen around 20 countries spoke on China's failing human rights record in Tibet and in East Turkestan and Hong Kong and other countries. So can you tell us what does the oral statement presented or made by these member states mean for Tibet at the UN?
Yes, as you rightly noted, there were 24 countries that specifically mentioned Tibet in their recommendations, out of which 21 countries raised serious concerns and recommendations about the situation of human rights in Tibet. And definitely this is a huge success for Tibetans and their advocacy work. It's generally the idea that when you do so many advocacy campaigns and when you really reach out to the member states to talk about Tibet, these are the platforms that we are looking at when they publicly talk about Tibet. So I think definitely this is a huge success for Tibetans to know, to realize that the member states continue to have serious concerns about Tibetans, about the situation in Tibet. And yes, as you said, 160 countries mentioned or spoke about the human rights situation in China. And not surprisingly, many definitely had their praises for China. But I think it is very important to know that nearly 20 countries mentioned specifically Tibet, and spoke about this. And for Tibetans inside Tibet, this gives huge hope, huge motivation, reassurance to know that the international community continues to care for Tibet and Tibetans, and for people in exile to know that when they carry out their advocacy campaigns, when they knock on the doors of the parliamentarians, when they knock on the doors of the governments, these governments take them seriously and sort of question China wherever possible and whenever possible. So this definitely is a huge success for Tibetans, I must say.
Indeed, I think it's a success because last time during the third cycle, I believe there were 12 member states who raised concern on Tibet, and this time the number rose to 20. So China, during its UPR review in 2018, UN member state specifically singled out concerns in particular over freedom of religion and belief, freedom of expression and assembly, the imprisonment of Tibetan language advocates Tashi Wangchu, and crackdown on Tibetan Buddhist lamas, and call for unhindered access for UN representatives to Tibet, right? So do you see any positive changes or rectification on the part of China based on the UPR submissions? And also, what are the changes or differences in the process at the UPR you have seen over the last cycle?
Yes, I wanted to add on that when I said this is a huge success for Tibetans. If you look at the previous cycle, the third cycle of the UPR on China, we had around 9 countries mentioning Tibet, and there were roughly around 11 recommendations on Tibet, but this time the numbers have doubled, more than doubled. In fact, we had 20 countries mentioning specifically Tibet, and we have 24 specific recommendations on Tibet. So definitely we have come a huge, we have really progressed, and our messages are reaching and are resonating in the international community. Member states are taking our concerns more seriously. So I think this is a huge improvement for us. And when you speak about the changes, for example, if you look at the third cycle of UPR, there were many countries which had lavish praises for China about its improvement and etc. But then this time that tone was much more muted. The countries that did commend China, they were more on continue to improve or things like that, but not as lavishly praising or openly praising China as the last cycle. So I think that is important. And also, if you look at the current cycle of the UPR, if you go through the recommendations, the numbers that we are talking about, the 20 countries mentioning Tibet, these are specific mentions of Tibet. But also what you have to remember is that many member states also recommended China to implement the treaty body concluding observations and recommendations. So, for example, the UN Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights review that just happened last year, they have come out with a very, very strong recommendations on Tibet. For example, closing down of coercive boarding schools across Tibet, ensuring that rural schools are reopened, ensuring that the language is the Tibetan language is used in more of a bilingual setup, not just as one of the languages that is taught. So we had very strong recommendations also on protection of freedom of religion and etc. So I think when we are counting the specific mentions of Tibet, that is 20 countries. But then there were many more countries that really called upon China to implement the recommendations of the treaty bodies like the UNSSR. Also, we had the CEDAW review, the discrimination against women in China review, and even during that review, there were very specific mentions of Tibet to ensure that there is more leadership positions created for Tibetans, eradication or elimination of discrimination against Tibetan women, eradication of discrimination against Tibetan women religious practitioners. So there were very specific recommendations in these treaty bodies as well. So when the member countries specifically say that that we have to implement the recommendations from these treaty bodies, that also includes recommendations on Tibet. So if you count those, I'm sure that there are over 35, 40, nearly 40 recommendations specifically on ensuring that there is the recommendations of the treaty bodies are implemented, more access is given to the UN bodies to China, because access to China also includes access to Tibet. And then again, there are recommendations on protection of religious beliefs of minorities, because China considers Tibetans as minorities, but then for us Tibetans, we have been minoritized by China after the 1959 occupation of Tibet. So if you include and add all those recommendations, definitely, the recommendations on Tibetans are nearly, 40 countries have spoken on Tibet. Having said that, I think for the current cycle of the UPR, the recommendations were very specifically sort of categorized into one, the situation of the boarding schools. Many countries called out China on the coercive boarding schools and called upon China to close them down. Second was on protection of cultural heritage and protection of freedom of religion of Tibetans. Czech Republic was very critical of that and said that they have serious concerns of violations of religious freedoms of Tibetan Buddhists, and that those rights should be protected. US had very specific recommendations as well. So if you look at those categories, I think one would be the boarding schools, one would be the freedom of religion, the other would be language rights. And then, of course, there were concerns raised about environmental issues and human rights defenders. So those are the broad categories where, the Tibetan issues were raised and discussed.
Can you take us through the process, your office in preparation for this 45th UNHRC fourth cycle on China review? What are the key issues of human rights repression in Tibet that your office has raised in the submission this time?
Right. So if you look at the entire process of UPR, it generally happens once in 4-5 years, depending upon how the countries are sort of slated for the UPR review. And during the last cycle of the UPR, we had participated in the written submission and shadow report. Similarly, even in this cycle, we had from our office, we had submitted the report on the situation of human rights in Tibet. Of course, at the helm was the Department of Information and International Relations. We have our team in Dharamsala working on the human rights situation, monitoring regularly as well as we do. So we had submitted a detailed report on the human rights situation in Tibet, and our recommendations and calls were again mostly on the ensuring that Tibetans are guaranteed religious freedom, not just in the laws, but those guarantees should be implemented and those rights should be protected at the ground level as well. And then, of course, on the closing down of the colonial boarding schools, because these are not just aimed at the current generation, but if we do not close down these coercive residential boarding schools, they hit at the cultural identity and the identity of Tibetans as a whole. So we had called for shutting down of those coercive boarding schools. And then we had called for release of political prisoners and human rights defenders who are languishing after unfair trial against them in political prisons. So we had called for their release as well. After the submission of the report, in coordination with the Department of Information and International Relations, we had reached out to all our OOTs, offices of Tibet across the world, and the representatives from each of those offices of Tibet have reached out to the countries under their jurisdiction for support, and called upon those countries to ensure that the situation of Tibet is mentioned and raised at the UN. So I think this has been a very collaborative work that has been carried out by all the offices of Tibet under the guidance and direction of the Department of Information and International Relations. And I think the results have come out very strong. And as I said, it has been a huge progress from the last UPR.
And Thinlay, you're one of the speakers at this site event, actually two site events that you have attended. One that is on the eve of the UPR, where it's organized by the Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights, where you share a platform of like panel with the fellow members of civil society and human rights activists on Tibet, and also one that you have attended right after the UPR session, which was yesterday. So can you tell us what were the core concerns and issues that were discussed among?
Yes, so we had two side events. One was pre-UPR and one post-UPR. The pre-UPR side event was organized by Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights, and it was a privilege and an honor to share the stage with Pujung Siringla, the director of International Campaign for Tibet, and also with Ladron Tetongla, the director of Tibet Action Institute, as well as with Kai Müller, the executive director of International Campaign for Tibet Germany, who was moderating the entire event. So during this UPR, we all the panelists sort of discussed the major concerns about the human rights situation in Tibet, including, of course, the almost non-existent freedom of religion that Tibetans are deprived of. For example, as simple as Tibetans not being allowed to possess and revere the pictures of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the restrictions that are being imposed on the reincarnated lamas, the rules, the slew of rules and regulations that are being imposed upon Tibetans, monitoring, regulating their day-to-day religious activities, and then, of course, the situation of the coercive boarding schools and the need for these to be shut down. And also about the cultural rights of Tibetans and how the Tibetan nomads are being sort of forcefully relocated from the nomad lands. So I think these were some of the most important issues that we discussed during the pre-UPR session. It was very encouraging to see that we had a recorded message from Madam Undersecretary Azrazia, highlighting the concerns that we have often raised with the US Department of State, and also we had the US ambassador to the UN here, Ambassador Taylor, who was present at the session, and she also took the floor and delivered a very strong statement of support for Tibetans at the UPR. And then after the UPR, we had a post UPR session where we had Dr. Gallo, Dr. Sophie Richardson, and Vincent Metten from International Campaign for Tibet, Hanno Schedler from Society for Threatened People, and then we also had, for the first time, two young Tibetans taking the floor at the UN side event, one from the Tibetan Youth Association for Europe, Thinlay Chukki, and then from Voluntary Tibet Advocacy Group, Switzerland, VTAG Switzerland, Tenzin Kando. And this side event was more aimed to discuss what happened, how Tibet was discussed, what their take was on the entire session. And it is very important to highlight today that during the side event, we also had representation from the People's Republic of China. The diplomat, the government official was present and wanted to interact during the question and answer session at the event. And I think one of the concerns that he raised on behalf of the government was that there were 130 countries that praised and commended China on its progress, and that we are not highlighting that. But then what needs to be understood is that 20 countries have raised serious concerns about situation inside Tibet. The 160 countries that did commended China really had a very muted conversation, more in terms of asking for further improvement. As I've already said, unlike previous cycle where there was just open praises on China, and also it was very interesting to see that the government delegation found it so important that he had to attend a side event after having 3 hours of opportunity to discuss and say their side, also wanted to come to our side event and make their case. But having said that, I think Dr. Richardson, Sophie Richardson, really put to them, saying that what is more important is that these concerns that the countries have raised are the true facts, the reality of human rights situation that has been portrayed at the UPR session, and not parroting some party line, unlike others. So I think that was a very important discussion, a brief discussion there during the side event.
Okay, and before I sign off with this conversation, can you tell us how can the UN, through its mechanism of such as the UPR, not only hold China accountable for the gross human rights violations, but also ensure changes in China's behavior and other actions?
Right. I think what was very evident during this UPR was how China is using the loopholes in the system. For example, you have seen the entire UPR process. The member states were really rushing through their recommendations because each member state was given only 45 seconds to speak. And 45 seconds, honestly speaking, is not enough time for countries, member states, to raise their concerns. So definitely, I think first of all, to begin with, the UN should really look at ensuring that if there are more than a set number of countries or member states that want to participate in the UPR system, the time slot should definitely be increased, so that the duration, there should be some sort of a trigger mechanism where if there are these many countries that want to sort of recommend and participate in the process, then the time allotted should be increased to certain number. Otherwise, it really was just the member countries, just jumping into the recommendation mode and not really sort of having enough time to go through their recommendations. So that is one suggestion that definitely the UN really needs to look into. In terms of what we can expect post UPR, I think even during the third cycle of UPR, there were very strong recommendations from member countries, but then where China failed was at implementation. So the member countries really need to push for China to implement the recommendations that they have made. Similarly, now with the fourth cycle of the UPR, we have 20 mentions of Tibet specifically, 20 countries mentioning Tibet specifically, and then we have much more recommendations which are applicable for Tibet. So I think the member countries that have made these recommendations should really look at ensuring that China implements those recommendations and takes those recommendations seriously. That is one thing. Secondly, of course, there's the entire UPR process is not yet over, because we just had the recommendations being made to China, and China will now look in the entire set of recommendations, and it will adopt the recommendations, whichever they think are feasible and are acceptable. So they'll accept those recommendations, and the ones that they think are not feasible or not viable, or that they do not have the political will to implement, they will reject it. So the entire UPR adoption will happen in June-July session. So I think we have to see how China sort of responds to those recommendations officially. And then, of course, we will have much more leeway sort of to push for the member countries to ensure that their recommendations are adopted and are sort of implemented in China and specifically in Tibet. Also, what we have to remember is that UPR recommendations are not legally binding, whereas the treaty body recommendations are. So this connection of how member countries have stated that the recommendations from the treaty bodies need to be implemented in China, I think those really hold ground, so that you are now giving ensuring that in your recommendations, the legally binding recommendations are also included. So, as I said, these are also applicable for Tibet. And therefore, I think definitely we have to push these countries and also the entire UN system to ensure that China is held accountable, and also ensure that China implements these recommendations.
Thank you, Tibet. Thank you so much for talking to us, and it was wonderful talking to you. And this has been a very insightful discussion on the fourth cycle of UPR on China review. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching, and see you all in the next episode of In Conversation with Tibettv.